Hello and welcome to the Film Angle. I'm Alex.
And I'm Kris.
And today we are talking about maybe my two favourite watches of the year so far, I would say. So we're going to delve in deep to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and our latest blind spot on the Sight and Sound Greatest Films of All Time list, A Brighter Summer Day, both of which I bloody love.
Yeah, I think you're in pretty good company here. I think
It's going to be a love fest.
yeah. This is going to be a pretty much a gushing session of just like adoration because both of these movies completely different in terms of where they're set and what they're aiming for and what they are, but just both could be easily regarded as masterpieces in their own realm. And I don't think I'm hyperbolizing by saying that. I absolutely love both of these.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump straight into Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Got it right.
Yeah, it's difficult because the second part of this film, or the third film in the trilogy, is going to be called Beyond the Spider-Verse, and I think we're all going to get those titles mixed up at some point. However,
just you,
just me, which is weird considering I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. So,
there's a lot of verses, isn't there?
There's a lot of verses. So, full spoilers ahead. So make sure you go out and watch it, and you should because it is honestly a game changer in the animation field and just film in general. So good. Yeah, we find Miles after the events of the first film, feeling pretty lonely, and Gwen Stacy from her universe, Spider-Woman, or Spider-Gwen, as many of us know her, comes back into his life, and they go on this kind of Spider-Verse adventure. Not out of... I'm really explaining the plot badly right now, but not because Gwen wants him to tag along, but because there is a secret society of Spider-Men trying to stop the Spider-Verse from imploding.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's a bad plot description, but we're just going to get into the film, and we hope you've seen it too, so you kind of know what we're talking about as we go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that, not to do it to disservice, but that is a lot of the plot line, for the major part until there are a lot of like twists and turns that kind of, are there that really are impactful, which, I think we've established ourselves as being a podcast that talks spoilers. So, I'm ready to talk about it if you are.
Yeah, absolutely. This film, to me, especially the opening 20 minutes, I would say, which doesn't follow Miles at all. We kind of jump straight into Gwen Stacy's world.
Yes.
Where she is the Spider-Woman of that universe, and her best friend Peter Parker became the Lizard, and subsequently wasn't able to save him, and he is her kind of Uncle Ben in that universe. This is like, it felt like watching multiple comics from different writers and artists coming together to culminate in this big event, which happens obviously near the end of the film, where we get all the Spider people together in one place. You've probably seen the trailer. A little bit of a shame that the trailer, because obviously I guess they're selling the fact that there's like 100,000 Spider-Men in this film. It's a little shame that all that stuff happens towards the end of the film. I feel like the trailer like gave that stuff away. We knew where it was heading the whole where it was heading the whole time. That being said, opening 20 minutes in Gwen Stacy's world, just quintessential Spider-Man dilemmas, her own story going on before Oscar Isaac's Miguel O'Hara comes in, Spider-Man 2099, to stop a vulture that's come from some kind of Renaissance universe.
Yeah. He's like a Da Vinci drawing. He's like he's 2-dimensional, very scratchy looking, and
lots of lines going on and stuff like that. And straight away I knew it was in good hands because it felt very Spider-Man-y, and the animation itself was just gorgeous. Like, Gwen's world is almost like dripping in like color, and it changes with the mood and the feeling and emotions. And I was I was absolutely
you're so
I was
right.
in safe hands from that minute, and the sound, just her banging on the drums as she's telling her monologue, and it like builds up in crescendo, and they play. It just brilliant.
Yeah, I really appreciated the first 20 minutes because I think it's the beginning of the film that you weren't really expecting how it would open. I think we all in our minds thought, yeah, it's going to start off with like Miles reintroducing himself like he did in the first film, and it's going to keep that like upbeat quality, but it kind of starts on a bit of an emotional note to start off with, which I
Mm,
really appreciated. And I actually like the trailer in terms of how it aids the movie going into it, because the trailer plays it off as a sort of like, hey, the joy of this movie is going to be, there's going to be obviously drama here, but we got all these different Spider-Man and all the different variations and everything, and that's going to be played to comedic value, but it doesn't actually prepare you for the crazy amount of emotional beats that are in this
mm,
movie, and that only actually served it a little bit more for me. I
yeah.
was able to be like surprisingly taken for the ride a lot more.
Yeah, it's not concerned with like having the spider people as like a gimmick per se. Even though it is, but it's not, that isn't the crutch of the film. The crutch of the film
Yeah,
is the relationship between Miles and Gwen, and subsequently their separate parents as well. So
yeah. I was
Gwen's
about to say,
parents or Gwen's dad and Miles' parents. And it is, yeah, it's really well done. It's really well done, and both kind of, both, we almost like jumpstart the film because you have a sequence within Gwen's world which sets up the story going, and then you almost start again in Miles's world, and both of those like separate starts to this film just feel like classic Spider-Man comics. Spider-Man can't have both. He can't have the good superhero life and the good personal
yeah,
life, and that's what they're both dealing with. Like, I guess they don't show too much of Spider Woman's life, but it seems to be going well. And then obviously personal life with her dad is kind of in the trash.
yeah.
Same again with Miles. Superhero life going well. He can't seem to, keep up with his grades. He can't get to his dad's party in
Well,
time.
at
He's
least say
letting
that
people
his
down.
grades are good, but bad for him.
Yeah, bad for him. Bad for him. Anybody else would be happy to have them. I
Yeah,
just love it that you could tell the writers, which include Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who kind of get most of the accolades for this. However, neither of the films have been directed by them, just produced. You can tell that the people behind this know Spider-Man inside and out, and yeah, it's just a really good Spider-Man story. As somebody who grew up reading the comics, it honestly just it
yeah.
is just like it is the character personified. Like the Spider-Verse comics themselves, which have come out within the last 5-6 years. I've only read one of the sagas. I think there was a Spider-Verse 2 at some point. They're nowhere near as good as this.
That's
Nowhere
what I've
near as good.
heard. I mean, I haven't read the comics myself, but I will obviously being so enthusiastic about this film coming off the back of it. I've been reading the discourse on Reddit and people comparing the depictions of Miles as a character since he's been introduced, and they all seem to sort of like agree out there that the films do the best sort of depiction of that character.
Yeah, Miles's comics, like the early run of his Ultimate comics. I've only read like his kind of origin story, and a few comics after that. I haven't been keeping up with him in the last few years. I haven't really been keeping up with comics in the last couple of years, really. But yeah, I mean, Miles is a great character in the comics, but yeah, they kind of elevate him here. He really feels like his own kind of thing here.
Yeah, and I think yes, this movie is like really honed in on the Miles and Gwen story, but you're so right. And for me, what really resonated in here was the relationship and between the parents, respectively. I really like this time around how, although a lot of the conflict in the first film, Into the Spider Verse, was really focused on Miles and his relationship with his father, I really, really like the way that is sort of continued here. But I really like the way we give more focus on Miles's mother this
Yes.
time around. I think the writing here, there's a couple of scenes. There's particularly a scene where they are awkwardly introduced to Gwen Stacy, and they're doing the protective mothering, fathering stuff, and it's really comedic. But there's this interaction between Miles and his mum afterwards, where she's reluctant to let her boy go away, and she can see him slipping away into adulthood. She knows that he's got stuff on his mind. Obviously, she doesn't know what we know as an audience, the implications of what Miles' like responsibilities are. but there is just some really intelligent, really thought out, non-perfunctory writing here that just really actually has emotional beat to it. It has a real heart, that comes from a place of a real genuine background and not something you get from a modern day superhero. Certainly the live action Marvel fare that we've been getting doesn't seem to reach this sort of genuinity, like of of heart here.
Yes, I absolutely agree, and I think that's where animation comes in as well, because you can do things in animation which you
Well,
just
it
can't
feeds
do in
into
live
our
action.
Disney discussion we've had over the last couple of weeks of live action remakes. There's limitations to what an actor can do on screen and what an artist can portray with a limited resource of animation and how you can express a character.
Yeah, but and also like this Spider-Man is probably the first Spider-Man since the Raimi trilogy to really be a character study more than anything
Yeah,
about what it truly means to be Spider-Man. And I think that all like, because I think Spider-Man 3 is still that. Um, all the films post Spider-Man 3 have not been so much delving deep into that, and this and Spider-Man 2, and the first Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse film, like really are films about what it truly means to be Spider-Man and what that means for the person
yeah,
under the mask, whether that be Peter Parker or in this case Miles Morales. And yeah, I think we haven't seen that in live action in a while, and it does mean that when they do eventually come around to bringing Miles Morales into live action, it's gonna be a tricky one to do. Before these Spider Verse films, I would have said like easy. He's a brilliant character. Bring him into
mm,
live action. Is going to work. But now we've had these like super creative, incredibly heartfelt stories with so much going on. Yeah, pressure's on for whoever
yeah.
takes that on.
Yeah. How did you sort of feel about the movie's length? Kind of going into, I felt the length of this, but not in a negative way. Honestly, I kind of, this movie kind of really hones in on its crescendo of a last act. There's like a
Mm.
30-minute period of this movie where it could have ended like 8 or 9 times, you
Yeah,
know,
I agree. I
but
agree.
not in a bad way. I mean, it really like holds you on tenterhooks and just adds the stakes on and piles them on in a way that like it leaves you with a cliffhanger by the end of this movie where you're like, it's a mess. Like the situation is a mess, and I'm so like I have no doubt in my mind that this is going to have a satisfying conclusion. That it's already mapped out. It's already prepared and placed in front of you as a way that they know where the narrative's going to go. But it is just like you completely feel for this character and the situation and all these characters, and you're like, I get everybody's side of the story. I get why everybody's angry with each other, but it's just even horrible that we have to wait till less than a year. I know it's less than a year than when it comes out, but it's still it's agonizing.
Yeah, I think if you didn't know this was a part two going in, the cliffhanger at the end maybe does work against the film in a bit. I do think that like Miles and Gwen's arcs with their parents do wrap up in a nice way,
Oh
despite the
sure.
fact that old Miles hasn't actually had that heart to heart with his own
Oh, it's
parent.
so cruel.
But we know how he feels about the whole situation. So I do think the film wraps up in its own way nicely. But yeah, that cliffhanger, um, yeah, it works against it slightly because there is not a true conclusion, and I want that. And you're right. Near the end is when you do start to feel the length because you know it's not going to wrap up and you
Mm,
don't want it to
yeah,
end. I found
yeah.
that in the last 30 minutes, I was like, I know I'm not going to be 100% satisfied at the end of this film, but I don't want to stop watching. Man, I cannot wait till the next one comes out.
I think
I want to watch them all together. I could have stayed in the cinema and watched 5 hours of this. I was just in it. It felt like a comic book, and it is a very comic book ending, and I mean that in a good way. But yeah, I don't know if you have been like kind of following some of the interviews with the directors and writers and actors and actresses, but the release date is next year, and it's less than a year away.
yeah,
They
it's March, isn't
haven't
it?
yeah, they haven't finished the film.
Right.
So I've got a feeling that's not going to happen. And they spoke to Haley Steinfeld the other day and said, "Have you recorded any lines for Beyond the Spider Verse?" And she said no. Now I don't know if she's just saying like she's maybe like putting us off the scent, or maybe she hasn't recorded any lines. But you think you record lines
There'd be
before you
no.
animate, right?
I don't really see the reasoning behind why they would do that.
No. I mean, she might have just been confused after a million interviews, or maybe she wasn't sure what she
Yeah, that's
was allowed to give
understandable.
away and what she wasn't, that kind of thing. We're still early days for the film when we're recording this. Like, maybe she didn't want to let people know that she makes it out alive and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've got a feeling that date's going to be delayed a little bit. Just got a feeling, and I don't want it to be. But at the same time, the quality of this film, like, take as long as you need, guys. Take as long as you need.
Oh yeah, there's no rush. I mean, there's a rush in terms of like I want to see where this narrative goes, but obviously that will like dissipate as the year goes on, and I see more movies. I'm coming off the back of this thing, but yeah, I mean, I could easily have sat down for like a 4.5 hour extravaganza. I didn't find. I've seen a lot of people who, while they love this film, find the animation and in terms of the dexterity of what they're throwing at you on the screen exhausting. I don't find it exhausting at all. I find it quite tranquil. There's this sort of feeling that washes over you when you watch it, and there's a feeling of being absorbed. I think if you're really, really engaging with the film,
Yeah.
like I assume from talking to you, like you and I have,
Yeah.
I felt like I could have sat there for another 2 hours in the cinema and watched part two.
Yeah.
Easily.
I agree. I think maybe so. I watched Into the Spider Verse again, like the day before watching this one, and
Yep.
I do think that the kinetic nature of the action scenes is a lot better in Across the Spider Verse. You have a better sense of place, but it is very fast paced, and I can understand why you might get a bit of a headache because it is very kinetic, and it's spinning and it's flashing and all these different styles. Things are
Yeah.
popping out. I get that, but
If you're
I do think it's a bit messier in Into the Spider Verse, not in a way that detracts from that film. The
interesting.
simplicity of that first film, I think, is kind of its gem.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, here the action scenes really really work a lot nicer.
Yeah, I think especially that scene where Miles is being pursued by Miguel. He's like the leader of the Spider Verse organization, and he is. So what's kind of transpired in the plot is that Miles kind of messed up his own multiverse. That he should never have been Spider Man, and that it's broke the canon as they put it. So Miguel and the other Spider Man, Spider Women, spider T Rexes or spider cars and everything you can imagine that you can put a spider in front of. They want to hold him prisoner until they can fix that reality, but that reality being fixed will result in the death of I think is it just Miles's dad.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Miles's dad becomes the police captain, and
Yes.
obviously in every other universe, Captain Stacy, uh, Gwen's dad, dies, and that's the thing in the comics. Like the
Whoever
two,
becomes captain dies. Yeah.
yeah, whoever becomes captain dies. Again, like this is where the logic starts to go. It's like, well, if he wasn't meant to be Spider-Man, will his dad actually die? And maybe that'll play into beyond the Spider-Verse. But yeah, basically they're just like, well, you have to stay here now because your dad's gonna die, and we can't let you muck up any more of the Spider Verse than already has been mucked up.
And that's what makes it really great for like watching it as an audience member is like I get the logic and reasoning, and I'm not angry with them, but at the same time you're really rooting for Miles, and you're like
Yeah.
it's a bit of a journey, and
Well,
you're real and him escaping this this dimension and with a legion of spider people like chasing after him is exhilarating to watch.
yeah. Well, it's the classic thing, isn't it? You can't save everybody.
Mm.
It's save the universe or the multiverse,
Yeah.
or save your dad. And you can't do both. And that dilemma's been thrown into multiple Spider-Man films. The most obvious and glaring one is obviously Spider-Man 1, where you have Green Goblin throws Mary Jane off one of the New York bridges, and then throws a what do you call it, like
Oh yeah, it's like a gondola,
Yeah,
like
that's it.
like
A
a
gondola of kids off
yeah
the other, and it's like you can only choose one. Well, guess what? Spider-Man can save and will save everyone, which
yeah
is why I love in that moment as Miguel is telling him like you are an anomaly. You're not supposed to be Spider-Man. Miles is the only one who is the most Spider-Man at
yeah
that moment because in a way I'm like a little bit like no way all those other Spider-Men don't are feeling exactly the same way because it's so Spider-Man to be like, no, I can save everyone, and I think maybe they'll play into that in the next one because you do see a little bit of
mhm,
rebellion from a few of them. But yeah, I just loved it because it was just like for me, I was just like, no, Spider-Man does save
yeah.
everyone. I just
And
sound like an absolute loser right now. I really am.
but that scene, when I think about this movie, that's one of the scenes that pops in my mind the most, and it's the how kinetic the action of that scene is, and it almost has this sort of over the top anime quality to it. It feels,
Mm,
at times it feels like larger than life and melodramatic. And I want to like spotlight some of the voice acting too. I think Oscar Isaac does a really great job of Miguel.
brilliant.
Like, does not like ham it up at all. He really leans into the characters, like the sympathetic nature to that character, and sort of the downtroddenness to that character too. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously he has a past too, like every other Spider-Man in this universe. But yeah, he's really good choice here, and it's really good because I feel like Oscar Isaac has kind of had a little bit of a lull recently. Not
you
due to
reckon?
his own fault. Well, I don't know. I think he's had some bad luck of projects recently. I
Like
mean,
what? Like
meh.
what?
Well, I think Dune's great and everything, but I mean, Moon Knight wasn't a big success for him. Um,
He was still good in it. I mean, like I still think
no,
Moon Knight was a success.
what I'm saying is, I think Oscar Isaac has the potential to be one of the greatest actors ever. Right?
Oh,
I
I
love
see.
him to
Okay.
bits, and I don't think he's ever, not due to a fault of his own, a film's ever reached the potential of him that Inside Llewyn Davis ever did when he first came along. The excitement that I felt initially for him in 2013 when he came on the scene is like, this guy is going to be one of the biggest actors ever, and I don't know if the projects have ever met him on that. Star
Okay,
Wars. I feel, yeah,
yeah.
I'm talking
You're
probably.
saying he's maybe done too many big studio projects and he needs to earn his Oscar.
He doesn't need to earn anything. I think he's great. I think sometimes the projects kind of limit him a little bit.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed him in the card counter that we discussed
Mm,
on the podcast recently. But I'm just, I love him so much. I'm just waiting for his right moment here. But I think,
yeah.
this is just another example of how great he can be whenever he's utilized correctly.
Yeah, you
Um,
want you want more card counter and less Moon Knight.
but he can do that sort of stuff too. I mean, but yeah, you're right. You're right. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but
No, no,
I
I completely understand. I completely understand. Like when you think of other actors who have kind of towed the line, you think like Adam Driver can do a big studio project, but then come back and do
yes,
something like Marriage Story and just like blow the pants off of everybody with his
yes,
performance.
because he's
And
penetrated the zeitgeist in a way that people like.
yeah,
He's built a fandom around him where he's impenetrable a little bit, and Oscar Isaac just sits out of that lip a little bit.
I agree. I agree. He is a brilliant, brilliant actor, and he could be your Adam Driver type that toes the line really, really well.
Hmm.
But yeah, you're right. Maybe he's done a few too many studio things recently
But I think
that
everybody's
that
great.
don't allow him to just truly be the magnificent actor he is.
No, I completely agree, and I think there's a lot of great performances in here too. I think Haley Steinfeld is great
Yep.
as Gwen Stacy. I think she's another example, another Oscar Isaac example where I absolutely think she's got incredible potential. Loved her in Edge 17. Obviously,
Hmm.
True Grit was back in 2010, which was like, I know she was a child, but she still should have won the Oscar for that, I believe. Um,
Yep.
but it's great to see her do some amazing work here. Brian Tyree Henry, love the guy. I'm so glad to watch his career just blossom, and he's becoming such a big figure in Hollywood now. So, and
He's got such empathetic
yes,
performances. I just love the way he carries himself, and I know it's only voice here, but you feel it
oh
in the
yeah,
same
yeah.
way.
Yeah, I mean, in live action, his eyes are like some of the most. You can kind of fall into his eyes, when you
Mm,
watch him in a film. Like if you think about if Beale Street could talk, I know you haven't caught up with Causeway yet with him and Jennifer Lawrence.
I
Um,
haven't.
a movie a lot of people haven't caught up with from last year. Absolutely overlooked. Them two are incredible in that. Definitely catch up with that film. But yeah, I mean, it just proves he doesn't need to show his puppy dog eyes to kind of portray the emotion here. But that's it. I just think it's such a spotlight. Nobody ever really talks about voice work in a prestige way, and it's so much like I think it's such an overlooked,
Mm,
part of the movie industry. I think there should almost be an award category in the Oscars for vocal performances because
yes.
it's such a talent in itself, and I completely admire it. Sometimes I admire it more than acting because you think about how many times these actors have to do these same lines over and over again, but like in 50 different ways to the point where they probably lose their voice at the end of the day.
Yeah, I
It's
agree. I'm a big advocate for voice actors and stunt actors to get their to get their due in the Oscars because it seems ridiculous that neither have a category there.
Yeah, for sure.
Another voice actor we didn't point out was Jason Schwartzman plays our uh, I wouldn't say main villain. I mean, I wouldn't even say that
Villain,
Miguel,
super
Spider Man
villain of the
20.
week.
Yeah, Spider Man 2099 is your main antagonist of the film, not a full blown villain, just antagonist. He is standing in the way of
Those
Miles.
are the best. Those are the best Spider-Man villains, right? The
Exactly.
gray villains. Yeah,
And and Jason Schwartzman in this film plays the Spot, who is a
yeah.
D-list Spider-Man villain at best. Not very often does he appear in the comics. However, he did appear in one episode of the '90s Spider-Man show, and I flipping love the Spot in that episode. I just want to say that when I was young, I was fascinated with the Spot, and then like he just never turned up in the comics, but I was always fascinated with that episode. I love his powers, think they're great, but he is, yeah, I mean, like he's never really been utilized in a way that makes him a big bad. And I think Jason Schwartzman does this brilliant thing. Like it's a completely new origin story, but the powers are there, apart from the multiversal nature of them. But obviously, he's gaining power throughout the film. And I think the way it builds him up from like this crappy villain to by the end of the film a major threat. And kind of wimpiness in his voice, but growing in confidence as he
Yeah.
becomes a better villain. I think he does a really good job. And yeah, there you go. The Spot is a big Spider-Man villain.
Yeah, I think it does a really good job of that too. Because like, even as an audience member, you're sort of laughing him off, just like everybody else is
Mm,
in the film, and you don't actually really realize because there's so much else going around Miles and Gwen as characters that like the Spot is just like a peripheral distraction in the background and really not something that's at the forefront of the narrative. So whenever
mm,
he does come and take over the narrative, it is as unassuming it to the audience as it is for both of those characters and everybody else
yeah.
around. So yeah, it's great. I think so. Really enjoy. I think I always got a spotlight, because I always go see these new releases with Lauren. Lauren really appreciated Hobie Brown Spider Punk.
Oh, so
um,
good.
there's Daniel Kaluuya, who we all love. The art style, the punk rock
Yeah,
aesthetic for that was amazing. I think it's turned into a big favorite already for a lot of people who've seen the film, a lot of
yeah,
fans. You're really looking forward to seeing more of him in the future.
yeah.
Really, really,
I
really
don't.
cool.
Yeah, I from what I remember, like because with the Spider Verse comics, like Spider Punk was there, but I don't remember them ever delving too deep into his backstory. And I love how they brought him to the front here. And I thought he was just, yeah. Again, I'm with you. He was really cool. And there's a moment where he helps Miles escape, and he kind of sees the anarchy that is about to unfold before disappearing. He kind of just like lets out this little, as if like shit's about to go down.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, I could feel I like wanted to applause, I'm sure in the American cinemas they did. In the English ones we don't. But yeah, that was a real moment where I was like, I'd want to applaud right now. It's just like so
yeah.
excited.
Oh man, I mean, oh yeah, I know. I felt like the room wanted to cheer, but like everybody's just too polite in this country to do
Mm,
it. Um, no, I mean, man, I just want to watch this again now. I really do.
yeah.
I think again, uh, I think it's a little bit unfair that everybody's saying that, oh, it's not fully fleshed out. It's the same thing as Dune when Dune ended in part one, where it's like I like this movie, but I can't say I love it yet because part two hasn't came out yet. And again, any other movie apart from Spider-Verse, I kind of would agree with that, but this just definitely does seem to be, not a cash grab element, but a real way to kind of make the most out of the narrative. And I do really feel like, that'll part one and part two, when they put together, will just feel like a big cohesive film.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's great. I find really little to hold it back on. There's very, you use the word ambitious, but usually the word ambitious is kind of like a charged word, where it's kind of double-edged sword, where it's like, oh, it's ambitious, but it's doesn't quite, meet the mark. This is like one of the only movies that's like really, really, really ambitious, but hits everything that it's supposed to. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's really, really rare. So it's a game changer for the animation. We're already seeing the new Turtles movie coming out this year is already following suit in terms of its animation. Puss in Boots kind of leaned into some of it in its action scenes, kind of borrowed from the very first Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse movie. So it's a game changer for the animation, and I think it's great. I mean, obviously you're watching something that looks like hand-drawn animation, but it isn't. It's all made on computers, but it still feels like something that is full of life and made by people that care. And that's something we've been missing from the genre for some time, and I'm really, really excited to potentially have it back and see how it's stretched in the future. Or misinterpreted and misused, like anything that's good in Hollywood. So we're going to see how that pans out.
I think probably misinterpreted may be the way forward. But that being said, I'm completely agree with you on all those points there. And it's weird because the first film did feel different and monumental in its own way, but it really feels that they've kind of truly honed the animation in it and kind of used it to its full potential here. It did feel like I was watching something that was like a turning point within the genre, and I was like, this is big. And I think they've just very much used it to the full potential in this film. Well, maybe not the full potential yet, but it feels like watching something completely new. I was in awe of it. I think you're right. The ending does work against it in a way at the moment. That might be reevaluated next year when Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out. Because I still think I love the simplicity of the first one, and I think the emotional beats hit better in the first one. Maybe because of its simplicity, and I do think that is a 5-star film. However, I didn't think that when I first came to the cinema. I just liked it when I first saw it.
I actually went back on your Letterboxd. I was doing a bit of a nosy to see what you thought about the first movie. And I saw that your first review was a 4-star, and then you revisited it and gave it an extra half. So
yes, and then I saw it again Sunday night. I gave it 5. I think it's a 5-star film. Film, and I need to revisit it. I came out of this feeling a lot better, and I docked that half-star because I don't know if it didn't. Yeah, it's going to have to be reevaluated. But I haven't been to see a film in the cinema twice in a long time. I don't even know if I will with this one, but I want to. I really want to go back and watch it again. It's just finding the time. But I haven't felt the need or the want to go and do a double cinema viewing in a long time. I just want to see it again.
And I mean, I had that a lot in my teenage years where I would just see a movie like 4 or 5 times. But I think there's so much to see now that, as cinephiles, the more you kind of delve into cinema, the longer the list, for lack of a better term, gets. So, but this is one I would urge anybody to see on the biggest screen possible. I know I had the pleasure that the one thing that Plymouth has, I said, going for it is that it's got an IMAX screen. No, it has more things going for it, I'm sure. But I saw it on a big IMAX screen, and it was a great way to see it. You're engulfed by this experience. So, urge anybody to go seek it out that way.
I agree. That was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Shall we move on to our next?
Yeah, let's switch gears a little bit here.
Switch gears.
Yeah.
I bloody did love Across Spider-Verse, though. I really
I did too, and I bloody love this movie that we're about to talk about.
Yes.
As well.
So number 78 maybe in our in the Sight and Sound list. It is our second Edward Yang film in the list so far. The first one that we did review in a previous episode was Yi Yi, a film that I wasn't so hot on, bit lukewarm. And Chris, you were a lot kinder to it. You very much enjoyed Yi Yi, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Though enjoy might be a strong word, considering it's not a like a fun fest, But yeah, you regarded it quite highly. So that meant that I went into Edward Yang's second film on the list and his an earlier film than Yi Yi, with maybe a feeling of like, all right,
here we go again.
Yeah, I remember Yi Yi being long. This film is longer. I remember it being slow and just like lots of character stuff going on, but like I wasn't always like interest peaked, and I knew within like the first 15 minutes that something felt different about this film, and I was completely hooked. And
they're completely different films, aren't they?
Yeah, I watched this a day after Satan Tango, which was our 7-hour film. And I don't know whether it was because 4 hours is a lot easier than 7, but man, this 4-hour film blew by. I was absolutely astounded by it, and I feel really bad because I watched it in 2 parts because I assumed I wouldn't be able to make it through the 4 hours. And I woke up early the next day to catch the final 2 hours before I went to work, because I was just like, I can't stop thinking about this film. And I want to give it a rewatch that means I get to do the full 4. Shall I talk about what it's about?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, is a Taiwanese crime drama about Xiao Se, a young guy who kind of falls into a bit of a gang of youths. He kind of stays on the outskirts a bit, but he definitely leans towards one side of them and falls in love with the ex-girlfriend of one of the leaders, and kind of gets muddled into this world of kind of love and crime and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, it's a bit of an epic, I would say, an intimate epic, maybe.
Yeah, and it's crazy because a lot of this plot focuses on young adolescents, like 13, 14-year-old kids. And this is like a plot line that would be more in an American or Western film, would be more focused on like people 10 years their senior, it's like, and that's kind of the point of this movie. This is kind of like thrusted loss of innocence on children a lot younger than it should be. And I think a lot of context behind this as well. The movie it's quite personal to Edward Yang, the director, as looking into a little bit further. He there's a lot of mirroring from his own personal background, his life. It's interesting that it's set in 1960 Taiwan. This was sort of 1949, where Chinese nationalists had kind of lost the civil war to the Chinese communists, and millions of them were either exiled or they moved to Taiwan as a form of escape. And it's this sort of movement of people to a land that it's not their own, it's not home. They're living in Japanese homes that's from the previous Japanese occupation. So there's this sort of feeling of not belonging, and that sort of the choices of parents and the choices of government have kind of filtered into the youth, subconsciously, and that they're all kind of it's this sort of limbo land where youth gangs have sort of been able to sort of prevail. Everybody's sort of marginalized or categorized. Sir originally starts off in day school. The movie starts off that his grades are failing, so they put him on to night school instead, to his father's sort of dismay, and it kind of sets that path. It's like, as soon as you're on night school, well, you're involved with the kids that are never going to really make it, and it sets him on this path. I mean, it's not really like a dramatic Goodfellas. I'm a wide-eyed kid and I get wrapped up in the adventure of it all. This is a really subtle film. I think Chang Chen, who plays Sir, the main character. I didn't realize who it was when I until like the end of the movie. He's a big actor now. Like he's crossed over into like a lot of American cinema. He was in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and most recently we just talked about Dune. He played the Doctor in Dune.
Yes.
So yeah, it was really really great to see this guy who's kind of a completely different actor to what he was as a kid. He plays a completely like something about this role. It's like as a child actor performance, it's completely wise and non played up. It's very silent in terms of like he's just absorbing everything around him. But there's just a sadness to this movie that lingers over it the whole way, and it's going to like sit in my mind for a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's interesting you bring up like gangster films of Western culture, that they tend to almost glorify uh, the gangster world. Scorsese in particular. Before then, bringing it back down to earth and almost like pointing a finger at the audience, or at least he definitely does in The Irishman. But this does make you think like, no, this is all bad. This is all harrowing, and this kid's wrapped up in it. He is just, and he tries to stay impartial. He tries to stick to his morals. Um, and yeah, he's pushed to breaking point at the end of the film, where he's so rigid in this understanding of like loyalty and love and all this kind of stuff, that he has a sudden moment of just kind of breaking that and then stabbing Ming, isn't it? Is it Ming?
Yes, yeah.
Um, his, well, not even his girlfriend, but the girl he loves and wants to be his girlfriend and has kind of been on and off his girlfriend throughout the film. Yeah, but it's kind of like innocence wrapped up in violence, and yeah, it's I don't know, it just washes over you in a really kind of sad way, and there's a lot of stuff with involved with his family as well, and how they have to live life. The secret police
Yes.
take away his dad at one point, but it just seems like this is a thing that happens, like questioning him on his kind of communist background, and his ties to China and stuff like that. Um, and he just kind of appears again in a cafe. He doesn't run home to his wife. He just kind of appears again. He's just like, yeah, this is
Yes,
just life now.
yeah, that moment. See that thing. The movie is like two halves, and it's actually not a bad way to watch it in two parts, to be honest.
Mm.
Because the first half is really it's getting you into Sir's sort of gradual, slight downfall. Um, from his promise into kind of a point of no return. But the second half of the movie is just really how that story and how his actions impact the family, and we were kind of took a backseat up to this point, and now we really kind of get to kind of focus on how individually it affects them. But yeah, the moment when Sir's father is taken away, and the character, actually the family aren't given names in the movie. Actually, I think their actual character names are in script anyway, are father, mother, eldest sister, elder brother. And when the father's taken away to be questioned about his potential involvement in the Communist Party, if he knew anybody, because it's a real time of fear mongering. It's interesting. You're getting away from communism, which was getting away from oppressive dictatorship, but in a way, the pursuit of finding communism is almost communist in its own approach, which it's really contradicting. But he is kept behind for days in this small room where he has to write all the names of everybody he knows, is intermittently questioned, and there's the threat of being taken away forever, and his family know that, but it's like it's just an accepted thing in their town and their village. And that moment whenever he is let go eventually, and not even there's no congratulations about it, they just let him go and leave, and he doesn't go straight home. He goes to a restaurant and orders some food, and he comes across his wife. They both kind of have this sort of moment where they have this exchange with each other, where it's just like, yeah, they kind of catch each other in the act. It's really interesting, but is this sort of horrible acceptance of like these people are so stuck in their life and they've got no options, and they are completely succumbing to the government and what their lifestyle lets them do, and there's this hopelessness that things aren't going to get better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
you
think
see how they turn in on each other as a close knit unit as well, and it almost shows you how the gangs were formed. Like there is no one to turn to but your fellow people, your friends, your family. But the family in this case, they are so internalized. They are a unit together, and Shao Sir kind of breaks the unit by the end of the film.
yeah, I like to throw a spotlight on my favorite character.
Yeah.
There's some, for something that sounds so heavy, it actually is quite. It's surprisingly very easy to watch, and like you said,
Mm.
it's 4 hours long. It doesn't feel 4 hours long. It feels like a 2 hour movie because it's
Yeah.
so well paced. It is so well directed, and everything in this movie is completely vital to the overall message that Edward Yang wants to portray. And there's not an ounce of fat on this thing. Cat, there's a young boy who's kind of the half pint of the group. of He sits in there's two gangs in this. It's the little park boys and the 217s. Sir kind of leans towards the little park boys a little bit more, but Cat is one of the members of this gang, and he's a bit of a young crooner, and it kind of leans into the Western influence that leans over this movie too, where this country doesn't really have its identity, and there's a lot of leaning in on the American influence of rock and roll and music, and Elvis is sort of leans over a little bit of an impression.
Even the gangs feel like they're out of Greece or something, you know,
Oh,
like Little
yeah,
Park Boys and the 217. It sounds
it
like
feels
they
a
play
little West Side
T-Birds.
Story, doesn't it? A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the romance and them two caught in the middle. But Cat is this little bit. He performs in the concert halls, and he gets his friend to translate American songs so that he can sing them, and he records over. And he's such a gem in this movie. It's such a brilliant performance, played by Wang Chi-san, who I think was his only ever performance in a film. Absolutely steals the show whenever he's in a scene, adds the little humor that this movie really needs. And turns out
Mm.
this little guy who like is surrounded by people who are just trying to make themselves larger and as imposing as possible. He's like the most loyal kid here, and he's got more, balls than any of them really.
Yeah.
I really love this character. And yeah, I fell in love with him. I think Lisa Yang does a really good job as Ming, who's kind of the love interest. Playing her could have been a really simple, perfunctory role. It could have been like, oh, the girl that kind of teases the guy, but she's complicated too.
Very complicated.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
and to her fault in a way, she's too complicated. Despite the fact that she does say many times to Sir, like, I don't need to be saved. Like, but he's a lot more romantic in his kind of. He has this kind of like ideals of what life and romance should be, and she is very much more of a free spirit.
yeah, once she changes her mind a lot too, but that's the crux of adolescence though, as well, isn't
she's
it?
a teenager.
Yeah, she's a teenager, but that's the thing. Like, we're these rules of being, beyond your years and trying to make decisions that are so much beyond you are just thrusted upon these children. Yeah, that's essentially what they are, children at such an early age, and their lives are so separate from what their parents Sir's father has probably no interest because he doesn't want to know what Sir is up to. There's just complete like ambivalence to what everybody's lives are doing. That's a common thread with Yang in his films. Yi Yi was similar, where everybody was like living on a separate track, but their choices and their decisions ended up coming home and influencing everybody else. And that's kind of like what brings it all home here. There's a really shocking ending here. But I think it's based on a true story, which was recorded as being the very first ever adolescent murder in Taiwan. There's very little like newspaper articles or documentation to read about it online, but it was like something that was monumental and kind of shook the nation at the time, and it's kind of been it's kind of being readdressed, and that's what the movie's sort of about, is that how this crime was influenced by the decisions beyond these kids that were made politically before, and the state of the country. So, it sounds heavy themes, but you're really taken away for the ride, and it's a real emotional journey. And Yang's use of camera work here, like he floats around, like he's always so. There's never a lot of close-ups in this movie. The camera's quite far back. It's almost like you're like some sort of specter in the bushes
Like you're
watching,
peering onto these people and their lives.
yeah, you're just watching these people's lives unfold in front of you. That's what's happening, and the most naturalistic kitchen sink way, but it feels so epic, and it feels like a masterpiece at the same time. It feels like something, like no wonder it was in Scorsese's like short list of like international films you must see before you die, because it feels like something like Scorsese would have made if he if he came from that background or something like that. It
Because
feels,
the gangster stuff really works, despite the fact that it is kind of like kids. And
but
and there was an element of me where I was like, oh, is this going to feel like, I don't know, playing dress up? But it does work. And I think the limitation to that is like when the violence hits, it feels like a film. Like it feels like they are playing violent. There's no blood. There's no the violence isn't as impactful as I would have liked it to be, apart from your final stabbing with Ming. I think mainly just because it's a very intimate thing, and then the shock as Sir kind of realizes what he's done. But if I was to say there was a critique, maybe the violence doesn't land.
I think the tension makes up for it.
Yeah, I was about to say, that being said, like the tension and the politics of it all kind of play
There's
so
a
well.
feeling like something can erupt at any moment.
Yeah, and there is a full blown massacre, and
Oh yeah. Straight. That's where the movie kind of,
that's the midpoint.
that's the midpoint, really. Yeah, whereas this terrible massacre happens, and it's really shocking, because you're like, you just can't believe it, because they're like 13, 14 years old, and they're like willingly laying their lives up for the most ridiculous causes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No, I do think, wasn't it like Honey's friends or something? It's not all members of the gang. It does get a little
there were
confusing.
older members too.
Yeah, it does. It does get like some of the stuff does get a little bit confusing, and I don't know whether that's more of a translation thing, or a cultural thing, or what. But I couldn't always follow what was going on in the game world. Not a detriment to it. You get the idea. You get the feeling.
Yeah.
And, still absolutely adored this film.
Well, it makes sense that these guys are birthed out of this. If you're living in a country where there's no scope for the future, you don't know your place in it, you've been put on a path where you're set up to fail, then you make your own autonomy, you make your own family, you make your own decisions. And when you create this own little society of gangs, that's the only thing that matters. That's everything. Your passions, your hates, your wants are heightened to an insane degree where nothing else matters. You're left alone, and these kids are going through it with you. And you make your own narratives, and that's how gang culture across the whole world is kind of formed, isn't it? It's these people who are kind of marginally put to the side, and they're left to form their own communities, whether that's usually to a negative degree. But no, this is fascinating. I mean, I really can't believe I'm going to say this, but like it's a 237-minute movie that I might even return to again this year, because I just enjoyed it so much. I find it such a rewarding experience. There's not an ounce of fat on this thing. I agree. I love Yi, but I think this is probably, I haven't seen every Yang film, but I'd be impressed to see if there's one better than this, because it's probably one of the greatest pieces of Asian cinema I've seen. I feel really, really lucky to have caught up with it, and I think it really deserves its place on this BFI list.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree as well. And it's like, for me, I'm just like, if every film after this, because this is in the 70s, if every film after this is better than A Brighter Summer Day, then bloody hell. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you know what? You think 100 movies. Well, we're not going to watch because we've seen some of these movies already. But 100 movie list, you think this is a bit of an undertaking. But we're really actually giving ourselves a reward here by letting ourselves watch 100 masterpieces. So,
Yeah.
or what are
And
regarded as masterpieces. But
yeah, I mean, between this and A Matter of Life and Death, I think like my favorite films of the series so far. And I kind of reevaluated A Matter of Life and Death and enjoyed it even more post watching it. And I feel like that's going to happen here as well,
mhm.
despite the fact that I really enjoyed both of them.
I think I think
This could end up on a rewatch as like one of my favorite films.
I
I
think
think.
every movie that we're watching on this list, like regardless of how much you love it, is going to be better the second time, because the one thing that's bad about doing this show and doing this list is the expectation going into it. You know, whenever you go to sit down on the sofa and I'm going to do this as homework, and it's like, I know this is regarded as one of the greatest films of all time, there is
Mhm.
such a pressure that you put on yourself to engage with the material before you go into it, that it sometimes takes you like a good like 30 to 40 minutes to kind of really recognize and contend with it. So once you like kind of actually realize, okay, this I get why this is on this list, it's really good to probably come back to it later on in another day.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, because there is an element of sometimes it's like, go on then, convince me. Why are you on this
yeah, I
list?
know,
And
I
it
know.
didn't take long for this film. I was like, yeah, this is something
Oh
special. I
yeah.
knew within 15 minutes, I was just like,
Oh, same.
this is incredible. There's something
You,
about this that's just there's the vibe, and it's not even like much happens in the first 15 minutes. In fact, it makes it out as if not a lot happens in the first 15 minutes, but there's elements in that first 15 minutes that are like essential to the plot of the film.
yeah,
I'm thinking mainly of just that brief moment where they catch two people kissing. It's just played as nothing, and
yeah.
then later in the film, it is like the explosion of drama. I just do you know what? Also, the other thing is, and I didn't think I'd say this a few weeks ago, but this film makes me want to rewatch Yee Yee. And like I said at the start
Yeah.
of the podcast, I was like lukewarm on Yee Yee. But if I had seen this film first, I think I would have gone into it with this kind of like, oh man, I can't wait to see what Edward Yang does next. And maybe it worked in my favor that I kind of went into this being like, all right, let's see what he does here. Oh, great, it's 4 hours, and then being
Yeah.
like, holy shit, this is good. But I just like now I want to see what he was doing in Yee Yee. Maybe I
Y-
didn't give it enough of a chance. I don't know, but I
It's
want to
interesting
rewatch it.
because the second half of Brighter Summer Day is kind of like a warm up to the whole of Yee Yee. You know,
Yeah.
because the Yee Yee is is all about the family dynamic,
Mm.
and it definitely does seem come from a place more of like a rose tinted glass. Well, no, I don't think any of these movies are rose tinted. They're actually quite um, regretful looks at the past. And
Mm.
the movies, the word longing just lingers in my head all the time. And yeah, Yi Yi definitely seems to come from a filmmaker more in his autumn years, although obviously Edward Yang only got to was he the age of 59, which is still so young
Yes.
and
So young.
gone too soon. And Yi was the last film that he got to make. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it'd be really. I wouldn't have no hesitation in revisiting both of these films and with a different perspective. I think that's just the magic of him as a filmmaker. Um, yeah, and why he has two movies on this list. Yeah,
Yeah.
feel very very privileged to have got up to this.
Yeah, I feel awful that neither of these films. I think I'd heard of Yee Yee, but I
Yeah, I
hadn't
think
gone
that's.
around to watch it. But I mean, I think there was a time pre Criterion where it was quite difficult to watch this film,
Mhm.
unless you were going to watch it from a kind of really compressed DVD or something like that.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
a brighter summer day definitely. I think it got a like an upscale like 10 years ago
yeah,
or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
probably Martin Scorsese had a hand in it,
yeah,
something like
probably.
that. um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I might go and buy the Criterion Blu-ray because I adored this film.
I might be right behind you.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean,
a
like,
weird day for HMV when they're just like two of
so
these
sick.
sold. Very strange.
Not at all. I well, you know, if I'm thinking about like trying to recommend anybody, are the two films that we discussed today to watch more than ever, I can't really say either or. I think go see both of these movies. I know Brighter Summer Day came out, 31 years ago, but or 30 odd years ago. But please go see that as soon as you can as well.
And
Both
I
of these
know it
movies.
feels like a 4 hour film might be a difficult feat. And I know we've both moaned about long films in the past. Films that are 2.5 hours, we've moaned about length. This is a 4-hour film that flew by. I would not cut a second of this.
No.
It warrants a 4-hour. It feels like a novel turned into a film, and it
There's
wasn't.
no
But
pretension here
it's
at
not an
all.
adaptation, but it just feels like it's just all
No,
quality content.
this is not. No, exactly. This is not a filmmaker that's out to impress you or to make a point of how brilliant he is. He is literally trying to tell a story of a life, or of a group of people and represent them in the most honest way possible. And it's tragic, and it's there's something. It's a quietly Shakespearean about it, or something just like of the ages. And I think it's I think, oh man, I might even readdress this. Like I've put it as a 4.5 on the letterbox, but I don't know, it might be worthy of a 5 because
I
talking
think
it,
so.
it,
Yeah,
it is just I keep thinking about it, and it's punctured with these musical moments and this sort of influence of the Western culture, and just it educated me, about a race of people in a place and time that I previously didn't know, and it's broke my heart.
it's one of those kind of like transnational cinema. The isolation and being in a place you that doesn't feel like home, but making a place for
The
yourself
themes are
within that
universal,
world.
regardless of where you're
Yeah.
from. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, like, as much as, like, there weren't gangs and stuff when, I was living in Germany, but, I kind of there was something I couldn't quite pick which part of the film felt like this or what elements of the film felt like this, but there was just, like, it did remind me of living over there and being
hmm
in a British school in an army camp and stuff like that. There was just elements of it that felt, I don't know, it touched a moment, but it was just a
okay.
vibe. I don't even know that I can pinpoint an exact moment. It just
But you were.
there were
It's like,
vibes.
but with coming of age stories in general, you can just completely you remember what it felt like when everything that seems small now. I just felt like the most monumental thing. But in this occasion, these they have reason to feel this emotional or this big
Mm,
about everything going on around them because we didn't live the lives that these people did, and it makes you feel like sort of disgustingly privileged at times. We watching these lives because you wonder like how people like this got through. And how these families kept together, regardless of all the implications on them. I think it's incredible.
well, it's been a bit of a love fest on this episode of the Film Angle, but we hope you don't mind, and hopefully the enthusiasm for both of these films comes across in a way that makes you want to check them both out.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry if it's too much of a good thing. But I love these films, both of them. What a great time. It hasn't been addressed, but I am sitting here in a Spider-Man costume.
Why did I not address it? I just
Just to
thought
make
like
you smile, Chris. Just to make you smile.
before we press record, it's just like 5 minutes of me laughing. I just like joined the call and you're full Spider-Man regalia. I mean, brilliant. I think I might have seen you in the movie. You might have been one of the background variants. Um,
Oh man, wouldn't that have been great? I would have died if they did that. Do you know they let a 14-year-old kid do the Lego sequence of the film?
is that true? Wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. He
impressive.
does like trailers on YouTube, and they let him animate.
Oh,
They let him animate that sequence. How amazing is that?
that is like one of the laugh out scenes for me. Not only is it like kind of a nod to Lord and Miller's like the Lego movie, but
Mm.
the fact when Miguel's talking to him through this like interdimensional phone call to this version of Peter Parker who's made of Lego, and he just finishes the phone call by saying, "Thanks, Peter. You're one of our best."
Yeah.
It was just like absolutely a steal, like it's just a steal of a moment.
Yeah, so good. So good.
Well, guys, that about does it for this week's episode of the Film Angle. Again, only 2 movies. We'll hopefully have more to talk about next week. But I think these movies are so big and so, incredibly lucky to catch up with these that they could easily fill an hour. So there was hopefully it was as enjoyable for you guys to listen to as it was for us to talk about them. Obviously, you can catch up with us on TikTok. It's more Alex's face on TikTok at the minute because he's just a bit more. I think he's just got less to do. To be honest,
That's how it is. No, I care more.
Yeah.
I care more about promoting this podcast, Chris.
There's a little bit of that too.
Talking of which, just to tease next episode, for all you Studio Ghibli lovers,
me.
Yeah. So, not really a blind spot for either of us, but the next film on the list is Spirited Away. Now, I watched Spirited Away so long ago that I don't really remember it, so we've decided we are going to allow me to revisit it. And Chris, you were just you watching it as one of your favorite films. You're just going to watch it again, and that will allow us to have a little bit of a Ghibli episode next week. I can't remember really what I thought of Spirited Away. I think I liked it. So we're going to reevaluate, or at least I'm going to reevaluate that one.
Cool.
So I think we got some Ghibli lovers in the audience. So hopefully they'll look forward to next episode.
Well, they've got good taste, so I'm looking forward to catching up with you in that one. As always, follow us on our Instagram page at The Film Angle. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you guys get your podcasts from. Please engage with our polls on Spotify. We always throw up a little question every episode, and really fun to see what your thoughts and opinions are. And it'll be sort of regarding this episode that we've been talking about in the films we've discussed. But for now, that has been this week's episode of The Film Angle. I have been Chris.
And I'm Alex.
See you later.
Whip.